You did what to the humans? Ambassador Crixtal's secondary breathing membranes fluttered in distress, causing a high-pitched whistle that made several other council members wince. High Commander Zix of the Drachnid Imperium shifted uncomfortably in his ceremonial armor, the normally imposing figure looking decidedly less confident under the collective glare of the Galactic Council's emergency session. We detained their engineering crew. They were clearly sabotaging our newest battlecruiser during the scheduled maintenance rotation. A collective groan echoed through the chamber. Representative Talara of the Ancient Consortium actually face-palmed, a gesture she'd picked up from her human diplomatic counterpart and found increasingly useful in recent years. Let me get this straight, Crixtal continued, mandibles clicking in barely contained exasperation. You contracted human engineers for maintenance work on your fleet, and then arrested them for doing their jobs. They were taking things apart. Important things. Critical systems were being dismantled, Zix protested, his scales flushing an agitated purple. The main quantum drive was in pieces. The targeting array was completely disassembled. They even had the audacity to start removing panels from the bridge. The chamber erupted in a cacophony of alien laughter, causing Zix to sink further into his chair. A small hovering service drone brought him a glass of fermented nutrient solution, which he gratefully accepted. "Oh, you sweet summer child," Talara said, wiping tears from her third eye. "That's what human mechanics do. They take things apart, make them better, and put them back together. Usually with fewer parts than they started with, somehow still working better than before." But, Zix stammered. "Our systems were perfectly calibrated. The efficiency ratings were within acceptable parameters." Acceptable parameters? A new voice cut through the chamber, causing several species' threat detection organs to twitch involuntarily. Human Ambassador Marcus Kingston strode into the chamber, datapad in hand and a look of barely contained amusement on his face. His ceremonial uniform was perfectly pressed, but somehow still managed to look rakish and slightly rebellious, a feat that had puzzled Xeno-fashion experts for years. "Commander Zix," Kingston continued, "your battlecruiser's quantum drive was operating at 67% efficiency. The targeting array had a 0.03-second lag in neural response time. And don't even get me started on the bridge's environmental controls. Your crew was basically working in a sauna because someone miscalibrated the thermal regulators during construction." "But those are all within acceptable military specifications," Zix protested weakly. Kingston grinned, and several council members who had been around humans long enough recognized it as the expression their species wore just before dropping a particularly devastating truth bomb. "Commander, do you know what humans consider acceptable specifications?" He paused for dramatic effect. "The bare minimum, the starting point, the well it works, but we can make it better line in the sand." He pulled up a holographic display from his datapad, showing diagnostic readings from the detained engineering crew's work. In the 6 hours before your security forces so rudely interrupted them, they had already mapped out modifications that would boost your drive efficiency to 92%, eliminated the targeting lag entirely, and figured out how to reduce your ship's thermal signature by 40%, while actually improving crew comfort. The council chamber went silent as the implications sank in. Zix's scales had shifted to an interesting shade of pale lavender that xenobiologists would probably want to study. "But why?" the commander finally managed. "Why make it better than specifications? The contract only required standard maintenance." Kingston's grin widened. "Because they're human mechanics. And telling a human mechanic something is good enough is like telling a Pyraxian fire dancer that room temperature is hot enough. It's physically painful for them to leave well enough alone." "It's true," Crixtal added helpfully. "I once made the mistake of mentioning to my human maintenance crew that my atmospheric shuttle had a slight vibration during re-entry. When I came back the next day, they had not only fixed the vibration, but also improved the fuel efficiency by 15%, added cup holders that actually kept drinks at the perfect temperature, and somehow made the seats more comfortable using nothing but the existing padding, and what they swear was just a bit of reshaping." Talara nodded sagely. "They did something similar to my personal transport. I still don't know exactly what they did, but it now handles like a dream, and the engine purrs like a contentedly sedated Earth cat." "But surely they must charge extra for these improvements?" Zix asked, a hint of hope in his voice that maybe he could at least justify the arrests on grounds of unauthorized billable work. The human ambassador actually laughed out loud at that. "Extra. Commander, your contract was for standard maintenance. They did that first, in record time I might add, and then started improving things because, And I quote from the chief engineer's report. Leaving it running that inefficiently would be a crime against machinery. He pulled up another holographic display, this one showing the detained engineers. They were sitting in their cell, looking not so much imprisoned as mildly inconvenienced, surrounded by what appeared to be detailed technical drawings sketched on every available surface. In fact, Kingston continued, they've spent their time in detention drawing up plans for a complete overhaul of your entire fleet's propulsion systems. By their calculations, they could increase your fleet's overall combat effectiveness by roughly 35%, while simultaneously reducing operating costs by 20%. He paused, examining the drawings more closely. Though I should warn you, I'm pretty sure I see at least 3 violations of the laws of thermodynamics in there. They tend to treat those more as polite suggestions. The council chamber erupted in another round of laughter, this time with an undercurrent of sympathetic understanding. Every spacefaring race had their own story about the first time they'd encountered human engineers and their peculiar compulsion to improve everything they touched. I may have acted hastily, Zix admitted, his scales finally returning to their normal hue. How do I, correct this diplomatic incident? Kingston's expression softened slightly. Release them, of course, and maybe let them finish what they started? And apologize, Talara added. Preferably with high-grade coffee and unrestricted access to your engineering bay. Coffee? Zix asked, confused. Trust me, Kingston said. It's the universal peace offering for human engineers. Though I should warn you, once they're properly caffeinated, they might start looking at your weapon systems too. They were pretty excited about something they noticed in the plasma cannon configurations. But our weapons are classified technology, Zix protested. Commander, Kingston replied patiently. They've already figured out how they work. Now they're just itching to make them work better. It's what they do. It's what they've always done, since the first human picked up a rock and thought, you know, this would work better if I sharpened it a bit. The human ambassador stepped closer to Zix's chair, lowering his voice conspiratorially. Between you and me, Commander, you should thank your lucky stars they were military contractors. If they'd been civilian mechanics, they would have already hot-rodded your engines and probably painted racing stripes on the hull. Racing stripes? Zix asked weakly. Makes it go faster, Kingston said with a completely straight face. Several council members who had spent significant time around humans had to stifle their laughter, knowing he was referencing some ancient human wisdom that may or may not have been entirely serious. I see, Zix said, clearly not seeing at all. I will order their immediate release and restoration of their access to our engineering sections. Excellent decision, Kingston said, already typing on his datapad. I'll have the coffee delivered directly to your flagship. Oh, and Commander, you might want to warn your crew about the singing. The what? Human engineers tend to sing while they work. Something about harmonious vibrations and acoustic resonance testing, they say. Though between us, I think they just like how their voices echo in Jeffrey's tubes. Kingston's eyes twinkled with mischief. Try not to worry if you hear another one bites the dust during the weapon systems upgrade. It's traditional. As the council session began to wrap up, with formal apologies being drafted and diplomatic incidents being smoothed over, Ambassador Kingston pulled Commander Zix aside for one final piece of advice. Commander, a word of wisdom. Next time you see human engineers taking something apart, don't panic. When we disassemble things, it's not destruction. It's foreplay. Zix's translator glitched trying to process that last word, but the meaning was clear enough. As he watched the human ambassador leave the chamber, he couldn't help but wonder if perhaps his species had fundamentally misunderstood humans all along. They weren't the destructive force the Drachnid had feared. They were something far more interesting. Compulsive improvers, eternal tinkerers, beings who looked at the universe not as it was, but as it could be with just a few minor adjustments, and maybe a slight deviation from the laws of physics. He made a mental note to request human engineering teams for all future maintenance rotations. And to stock up on coffee. Lots and lots of coffee. 6 months later, the Drachnid Imperium's Third Fleet set a new record in the Galactic Defense Force's annual combat readiness trials. Nobody was particularly surprised, especially given the distinctive racing stripes now adorning their flagship's hull. Commander Zix, when asked about the controversial aesthetic addition, merely smiled and said, "The engineers insisted it would make it go faster. And you know what? They weren't wrong." The human maintenance crew, watching from their newly upgraded and extremely comfortable observation deck, just grinned and raised their coffee mugs in salute. There was already a betting pool going on how long it would take before the commander let them install the subwoofers they'd been proposing for the quantum drive chamber. After all, everyone knows the best ships need a good bass line to really hit their stride. Your engineers did what to my ship? Admiral Vkr'lak of the Drachnid 4th Fleet stared in disbelief at the holographic readouts floating before her. The displays showed performance metrics that shouldn't have been possible according to every textbook she'd ever studied at the Imperial Academy. Commander Zix, now sporting a significantly more relaxed demeanor and what appeared to be a world's okayest alien boss mug, a gift from his human engineering team, merely smiled. They improved it. But these readings... The Admiral's facial scales rippled in patterns that indicated severe cognitive dissonance. The inertial dampeners are operating at 118% efficiency. That's not even mathematically possible. Ah, Zix said, taking a sip from his mug, filled with what his crew now recognized as the sacred human beverage known as coffee. You're thinking about the old efficiency scale. The humans had to recalibrate it after they found out how to use quantum harmonics to actually generate excess dampening energy during high-G maneuvers. They what? Something about using the ship's own momentum to create a cascading resonance effect in the dampening field. To be honest, I stopped trying to understand the technical details after they started talking about quantum surfing the probability waves. He shrugged. But it works. We can now pull turns that would have torn our old ships in half, and the crew barely feels it. They even added cup holders that compensate for the G-forces. The Admiral looked down at the datapad again, scrolling through pages of modifications that seemed to casually violate various laws of physics. And this note about the weapon systems? Recycled waste heat from plasma cannons to power ship-wide espresso machines? Oh yes, that was a brilliant bit of engineering, Zix beamed. Improved our energy efficiency and crew morale simultaneously, though we did have to add extra bathroom facilities after increasing the crew's caffeine intake. But why would they... The Admiral's voice trailed off as she spotted something even more alarming. Commander, why does your flagship have what appears to be a subwoofer system integrated into the quantum drive? Ah, you noticed our bass upgrade. Zix's scales flushed with pride. The engineers insisted it would help synchronize the drive harmonics. Something about sick beats leading to sick feats. I'm still learning human idioms, but I have to admit, when we hit quantum speeds with Terran classical rock playing, well, there's nothing quite like it in the galaxy. The Admiral's third eyelid twitched. And the flames painted on the hull? They match the racing stripes. The engineering team swears the aerodynamic paint scheme adds at least 0.3% to our top speed in atmosphere. Zix paused, though I'm beginning to suspect they might have been joking about that part. It's sometimes hard to tell with humans. Before the Admiral could formulate a response, a series of excited shouts echoed from the direction of the engineering bay, followed by the distinctive sound of humans singing. The melody was oddly catchy, something about being under pressure. Ah, sounds like they've just had their afternoon coffee break, Zix noted. We should probably brace for another improvement announcement soon. Last week they figured out how to make the ship's AI tell jokes during combat maneuvers. They swear it improves reaction times, and our battle simulation scores have gone up 12% since implementation. Commander, the Admiral interrupted, her scales now showing patterns indicating both fascination and horror. Are you telling me that you've essentially given human engineers free rein to modify one of the Imperium's most advanced warships according to their whims? Oh no, not at all, Zix replied seriously. We have a very strict approval process. They have to explain their proposed modifications while I nod and pretend to understand the technical jargon, then demonstrate that it works better than before. So far their success rate is 100%, though there was that one incident with the artificial gravity generator that had everyone walking on the ceiling for a day. They fixed it eventually, and now we can actually adjust gravity levels for different sections of the ship, which has done wonders for our hydroponics bay. The Admiral opened her mouth to respond, but was interrupted by a cheerful chime from the ship's AI. Hey boss, the AI said in what was definitely not its original formal Imperial dialect, but rather a casual tone that wouldn't have been out of place in a Terran coffee shop. The engineers want you to know they've just figured out how to boost shield efficiency by another 15% by, and I quote, making the force field resonate at the brown node of the universe. They're asking permission to install the modifications after they finish their current project. Current project? The Admiral asked, dreading the answer. Oh yes, Zix replied enthusiastically. They're redesigning the mess hall to automatically detect crew members' preferred food temperature and adjust serving temperatures accordingly. Apparently one of them got tired of their coffee getting cold during long tactical briefings. The Admiral looked around the bridge, taking in details she hadn't noticed before. The crew stations were ergonomically optimized in ways that somehow made them both more efficient and more comfortable. The lighting had a natural quality that made everyone's scales look their best. Even the air seemed fresher, with a hint of what she later learned humans called new car smell. "Commander," she said finally, "I believe I need to requisition some of these engineers for the rest of the Fourth Fleet." Zix smiled knowingly. "I'll have my chief engineer contact their union representative. Though I should warn you, they'll probably want to start with your flagship's sound system. They have very strong opinions about acoustic optimization." "The what system?" "Trust me, Admiral. Just wait until you hear what they can do with a properly tuned quantum harmonic speaker array during a battle maneuver. We've found that Through the Fire and Flames pairs particularly well with high-speed tactical encounters." As if on cue, a deep, satisfying bass note thrummed through the ship as the quantum drive spooled up for a demonstration, accompanied by what the humans insisted on calling epic background music. The Admiral's expression shifted from concern to curiosity to something approaching excitement. "Commander, how quickly can you arrange that engineer transfer?" "I'll have my people call your people." Zix grinned, using another human phrase he'd picked up. "Just remember to stock up on coffee, and maybe invest in some decent speakers. Trust me on this one." Somewhere in the engineering bay, a group of humans were already drawing up plans for the Admiral's flagship, complete with flame decals and a state-of-the-art entertainment system. After all, if you're going to violate the laws of physics, you might as well do it with style. And coffee. Lots and lots of coffee. 3 months later, the Fourth Fleet's performance metrics had improved so dramatically that the Galactic Defense Council had to create a new rating system just to accommodate them. The Admiral's flagship now sported a custom paint job featuring what the humans called rainbow chroma shift pigments that changed color based on velocity. When asked about the modifications, Admiral Vkr'lak just smiled and adjusted the volume on her quantum-harmonized sound system. After all, nothing says superior firepower quite like executing a perfect tactical maneuver to the sound of classical Terran metal music. The humans, naturally, were already planning the next round of minor improvements. Something about using tachyon fields to make the ships do barrel rolls while looking, in their words, totally awesome. The Drachnid Imperium's accountants had long since given up trying to understand how all these modifications were being done within the standard maintenance budget. Some things they decided were better left unquestioned, especially when they came with a killer sound system. "You want to hold a what?" High Council member Drekthor's primary breathing sac inflated to nearly twice its normal size in surprise. "A drag race," Commander Zix replied calmly, taking another sip from his now customary coffee mug. This one read, "My human engineers went to Earth, and all I got was this reality-defying spaceship," in holographic letters that changed color based on the drink's temperature. "The human engineering teams from different fleets want to showcase their improvements." Admiral Vkr'lak, now sporting a leather jacket over her formal uniform, another gift from her engineering crew, nodded enthusiastically. "Think of it as a practical demonstration of our enhanced capabilities. The humans call it putting our money where our mouth is, though I'm still unclear on the physiological logistics of that idiom." "But," Drekthor's secondary eyes blinked in confusion, "these are military vessels. Frontline battlecruisers, not racing vehicles." "With all due respect, Council member," a new voice chimed in, "they're whatever we make them to be." Chief Engineer Jackson strolled into the chamber, bearing the comfortable confidence of someone who had long since stopped caring about traditional protocol. His uniform was adorned with various patches, including one that read, "If I can't fix it, it's not broken. It's an opportunity." "Besides," Jackson continued, pulling up a holographic display, "the modifications we've made for combat effectiveness translate beautifully to racing parameters. Enhanced inertial dampeners, optimized quantum drives, improved heat management systems." He grinned. "The fact that they also happen to make our ships faster than anything else in the galaxy is just a happy coincidence." "And the aesthetic modifications?" Drekthor asked weakly, gesturing to a hologram of the Fifth Fleet's flagship, which now sported an iridescent paint job that would have made a quantum crystal butterfly jealous. "Racing stripes are just the beginning, sir.
Jackson said with the air of someone about to unveil something either brilliant or terrifying. Wait until you see what we've done with the external illumination systems. We're calling it quantum underglow. It's not just for show. The photonic resonance actually helps stabilize the warp field. The fact that it looks, in technical terms, rad as hell, is just a bonus. Admiral Vkr'lak stepped forward, her scales showing patterns of barely contained excitement. We've already set up a racing course through the Crimson Nebula. The natural plasma streams and gravitational eddies make for perfect natural obstacles. Think of it as a combat readiness exercise. With style. And music, Commander Zix added. The humans insist that proper racing requires something called a soundtrack. They've been very passionate about optimizing our ship's audio systems for something they call space drift beats. Drekthor slumped in his ceremonial chair, realizing he was fighting a losing battle. And I suppose the other fleets are already on board with this competition? Oh yes, Jackson beamed. The 7th Fleet's engineers have already installed what they call a twin quantum turbo system. Nobody's quite sure how it works, but their ship can now accelerate from subluminal to warp 5 in under 3 seconds. The crew loves it, though we did have to upgrade the inertial dampeners to prevent their organs from swapping places during acceleration. The 9th Fleet has gone for a more classical approach, Admiral Vkr'lak added. Something about space hydraulics that lets their ship bounce on its own gravitational field. It's surprisingly intimidating in combat situations. And don't forget the 3rd Fleet's experimental quantum drift system, Zix chimed in. They can now slide sideways through space-time. The physicists are still arguing about whether it's actually possible, but they can't argue with the results, or the style points. Style points? Drekthor's translator struggled with the concept. Oh yes, Jackson said, pulling up another holographic display showing an elaborate scoring system. We've developed a comprehensive rating system that accounts for speed, maneuverability, aesthetic presentation, and what we call the holy shit factor. That last one is measured by how many spectators involuntarily express religious awe when watching the maneuvers. The council member looked from the enthusiastic admiral to the grinning commander to the absolutely serious chief engineer, then down at the formal request before him. The document was surprisingly thorough, including safety protocols, spectator arrangements, and even a section on proper victory celebration procedures that seemed to involve something called donuts, though apparently not the edible kind. And this will improve fleet morale? He asked weakly. Council member, Jackson said solemnly. Do you know what happens when you give a bunch of human engineers permission to make military ships race-ready, then let them compete to see who did it better? I'm afraid to ask. Magic happens. Physics-defying, reality-warping, absolutely glorious magic, with a killer soundtrack and some very tasteful mood lighting. The betting pool is already up to 17 million credits, Admiral Vkr'lak added helpfully, though I should mention that the engineers are more interested in bragging rights than actual monetary compensation. Drekthor looked down at the approval form again, then at the eager faces before him. Finally he reached for his ceremonial stamp. I must be losing my mind, he muttered, applying his official seal to the document. That's the spirit, Jackson exclaimed. Now, about the pre-race show. How do you feel about synchronized space ballet performed by battlecruisers? The what? Oh, you're going to love it, Commander Zix assured him. They've figured out how to make the ships dance to something called Thus Spoke Zarathustra. It's quite moving, literally and figuratively. As the details were finalized and the excitement spread through the assembled fleets, nobody noticed the small notation at the bottom of the engineering crew's shared planning document. Phase 1 of Operation Pimp My Battlecruiser, complete. Commencing Phase 2, Galaxy's Got Talent. The future of galactic warfare was about to get a lot more stylish, and significantly more base-heavy. 2 weeks later, the first ever Drachnid Fleet Racing Championship made history in more ways than one. Not only did it set new records for ship performance and spectator attendance, but it also marked the first time in galactic history that a military exercise had its own official merchandise line. The winning ship, piloted by a crew from the 4th Fleet, executed a perfect quantum drift through a plasma storm while blasting something called Running in the 90s on external speakers powerful enough to vibrate nearby asteroids. The victory celebration involved the entire fleet performing what the humans called a choreographed light show that could be seen from 3 systems away. The fact that they managed to sync it perfectly to Sandstorm by Darude was, according to several physics professors, technically impossible. The humans just called it a good start. Councilmember Drekthor, watching from his VIP observation pod, found himself tapping his appendages to the rhythm of the bass. He'd never admit it, but he was already looking forward to next year's championship. Especially after hearing rumors about the experimental sonic boom visualizer the engineers were developing. Apparently, they'd figured out how to make faster-than-light travel look cool. The future of the Drachnid Imperium was looking bright. And chromatic. And very, very fast.
Absolutely not.
The Galactic Defense Council's chief of security slammed all 4 of his appendages on the conference table.
It's completely out of the question.
But the ratings would be astronomical, Admiral Vkr'lak argued, her scales gleaming with what could only be described as mischievous iridescence. The first season of Pimp My Battlecruiser broke every viewing record in 12 systems. That's not the point! Security Chief Graxnor's bioluminescent spots were pulsing with stress patterns.
We can't turn our military operations into entertainment.
Too late, Commander Zix commented dryly, pulling up a holographic display showing viewership statistics. The Racing Championship's merchandise sales have already funded 3 new orbital defense stations. The Quantum Drift Queen action figure of Admiral Vkr'lak is particularly popular. The Admiral preened slightly. The leather jacket had definitely been a good call. And now you want to... Graxnor consulted his datapad with visible distress. Organize a galactic talent show featuring military vessels? Galaxy's Got Talent is just the working title, Chief Engineer Jackson explained, his uniform now sporting a producer's badge alongside his numerous engineering accolades. We're open to suggestions, though personally I'm partial to So You Think You Can Dance, Starship Edition. The security chief's spots shifted to a particularly alarming shade of puce. Dance? Dance? These are state-of-the-art military vessels, which can now perform a perfect synchronized routine to Swan Lake, Jackson pointed out. You should see what the Third Fleet can do with their quantum drift technology during the ballet sequence. It brings tears to the eyes. Literally, in some cases. We had to install special filters in the observation decks to protect against the quantum-harmonized light show. The Seventh Fleet has been practicing something they call breakdancing, Admiral Vkr'lak added helpfully. The way they use their enhanced inertial dampeners to spin their ship on its auxiliary axis while maintaining perfect internal gravity is quite impressive, though we did have to modify the mess hall to account for the centrifugal force on the coffee machines. Coffee machines that, I might add, are now powered by recycled energy from their quantum moonwalk maneuvers, Commander Zix interjected proudly. The engineers insist that the slight taste of space-time distortion actually improves the flavor. Graxnor looked desperately around the conference room, seeking support from his fellow council members. He found none. Most of them were already wearing promotional merchandise from the Racing Championship, including Councilmember Drekthor, who had somehow acquired a limited edition Drift King baseball cap that he wore at what the humans assured him was a properly jaunty angle. The revenue projections are quite compelling, the council's finance minister noted, her tentacles wrapped around a mug bearing the slogan, "My battlecruiser does 0 to warp in 2.5 seconds, how about yours?" And the technological advancements. About that, Jackson said, pulling up another holographic display. We've had some interesting breakthroughs while working on the show's special effects. Turns out, synchronizing quantum field harmonics for a light show accidentally led to a 300% improvement in stealth technology. Something about making the ships literally dance between dimensions. And the new propulsion system? Admiral Vkr'lak prompted. Yes, Jackson beamed. While trying to figure out how to make a capital ship moonwalk, we accidentally invented what we're calling quantum shuffle drive. It's 40% more efficient than standard warp technology, produces 0 emissions, and somehow manages to look incredibly smooth doing it. The physics department is still trying to figure out how it works, but they've given up arguing with the results, especially after we added the baseline. The baseline? Graxnor asked weakly. Oh yes, Commander Zix nodded. Apparently, the right frequency of bass actually helps stabilize the quantum field. We're still not sure if that's actual science, or if the universe just appreciates good music, but either way, our ships now travel faster while dropping sick beats. Speaking of music, Jackson continued, wait until you hear about our new combat system. We've figured out how to weaponize sound waves by combining them with quantum harmonics. We can now literally drop bass so hard it disrupts enemy shield frequencies. The engineers are calling it Battle DJ Mode. The security chief slumped in his chair, recognition of defeat evident in his rapidly dimming bioluminescence. And I suppose the other fleets are already preparing their performances. The Ninth Fleet has been working on something they call space crumping, Admiral Vkr'lak said excitedly. Their gravitational control is so precise now that they can make their ship appear to defy physics, which technically they are, but with style. The Fifth Fleet is more into classical performances, Zix added. They've mastered a move they call the quantum pirouette. It involves spinning through 16 dimensions simultaneously while maintaining perfect formation. The effect is quite striking, especially with the new chromatic quantum wake generators. Quantum wake generators? Makes the ships leave rainbow trails as they move through space-time, Jackson explained. Completely unnecessary from a practical standpoint, but it looks amazing on camera, and somehow improved our sensor stealth by 85%. We're still trying to figure that one out. Graxner looked down at the proposal before him, then at the enthusiastic faces around the table. Even his own security detail was wearing racing championship merchandise, their standard-issue armor now decorated with holographic decals that shifted colors based on their movement speed. I suppose, he said finally, if we're going to turn military operations into entertainment, we might as well do it properly. That's the spirit, Jackson exclaimed. Now, about the opening ceremony. How do you feel about a fleet-wide performance of Bohemian Rhapsody using nothing but quantum field manipulators and synchronized shield harmonics? The what of what? Trust me, Commander Zix said, patting the security chief's shoulder. Once you see a formation of battlecruisers hit that Galileo section while executing a perfect spiral maneuver through a nebula, you'll understand. The humans call it art. I call it a headache, Graxner muttered, but he reached for his approval stamp anyway. Speaking of headaches, Admiral Vkr'lak added cheerfully, wait until you see what we've planned for the finale. Ever heard of something called crowd surfing? The security chief's spots went completely dark. Please tell me you're not going to make battlecruisers crowd surf. Of course not, Jackson assured him. That would be ridiculous. He paused for effect. We're going to make them stage dive. The quantum gravity calculations are already worked out. As the meeting devolved into excited technical discussions about the logistics of making capital ships perform synchronized dance moves through multiple dimensions, nobody noticed the small addition to the engineering crew's shared planning document. Phase 2 proceeding as planned, commencing Phase 3, Eurovision Space Contest. The future of galactic entertainment was about to get very interesting, and very, very loud. To be continued. Look, all I'm saying is that if aliens ever do invade Earth, they're going to take one look at our internet history and just back away slowly. That's optimistic. I think they'd nuke us from orbit. It's the only way to be sure. I chuckled as I took another sip of my coffee, watching my roommate Theo gesticulate wildly with half a bagel. It was our traditional Sunday morning debate at Cosmic Grounds. The kind of hole-in-the-wall coffee shop that insisted on serving everything in mismatched thrift store mugs and playing vinyl records that nobody had ever heard of. You know what? I said, leaning forward. I think we're giving aliens way too much credit. What if they're just as screwed up as we are? What if they've got their own equivalent of cat videos and conspiracy theories? Before Theo could respond, the sky outside turned a sickly shade of purple, and the entire coffee shop went silent. The hipster barista with more metal in his face than my car had in its engine dropped a freshly made latte. Guys? Called out a woman by the window. You might want to see this. We all crowded around the windows like extras in a disaster movie. watching as what could only be described as a massive metal jellyfish descended from the clouds, hovering over downtown. "Well," Theo said, turning to me with an expression halfway between terror and vindication. "Looks like we're about to find out who's right." Here's the thing about alien invasions. They never happen when you're prepared. Not that anyone is ever really prepared for an alien invasion. But they especially don't happen when you've just paid for an overpriced coffee that you haven't finished yet. The massive ship, and yes, it was definitely a ship, not some weird weather phenomenon or elaborate marketing stunt, hung over the city like the world's most ominous chandelier. Smaller craft started to deploy from it, zipping around with the kind of aerial agility that made every human aircraft look like it was moving through molasses. "We should probably run," someone suggested. "Where to?" I asked, genuinely curious. "If they can cross interstellar space, I'm pretty sure they can find us if they want to." As if to prove my point, a beam of light shot down from the mothership, striking the center of the park across the street. When it dissipated, 3 figures stood there, surveying their surroundings with what I could only assume was the alien equivalent of cool disinterest. They were tall, maybe 7 feet, with skin that shifted colors like an octopus having a seizure. Their heads were oddly elongated, with 4 eyes spaced evenly around the circumference, presumably giving them 360-degree vision. They wore what looked like armor but moved like fabric, shimmering with an iridescence that would make any fashion designer weep with envy. "Anybody speak alien?" Theo whispered. One of the aliens raised what appeared to be some kind of device, pointed it at its mouth area, and then spoke in perfect, if slightly robotic, English. "People of Earth, we are the Zaxovians. We have come to—" The alien was interrupted by the sound of a car alarm going off, followed by a dog barking, followed by someone yelling at the dog to shut up. The alien waited, its color shifting to a mildly annoyed orange, before continuing. "As I was saying, we have come to—" This time it was interrupted by the hipster barista, who had apparently found his courage at the bottom of a cold brew. "Are you going to order something? Because we're about to close." The coffee shop wasn't closing. It was 10 a.m. on a Sunday. The alien's colors rippled in what I could only interpret as confusion. "Your establishment closes at this early hour?" "No!" I called out, stepping forward because apparently my survival instinct had taken the day off. "He's just being a jerk. Sorry about that. You were saying? You've come to—" The alien's colors settled into a more neutral blue. "We have come to subjugate your planet and harness its resources for the greater glory of the Zaxovian Empire." There was a moment of silence, broken only by someone in the back of the crowd muttering, "Well, that's refreshingly honest." "Why?" I asked, surprising even myself with my boldness. "I mean, space is full of resources, right? Asteroids, uninhabited planets, that sort of thing. Why bother with a planet full of people who are going to, object to being subjugated?" The alien's 4 eyes blinked in sequence, like a carnival ride lighting up. "Because," it said, as if explaining something to a particularly slow child, "that is what we do. We are conquerors. It is our purpose." "That's not a great purpose," Theo chimed in. "Have you considered basket weaving? Or maybe gardening? I hear gardening is very fulfilling." The alien's color shifted to a dark red. "You mock us? On the eve of your conquest?" No, I said quickly. "We're just processing. This is how humans process existential threats, with inappropriate humor." "Interesting," the alien said, its color softening slightly. "Our scientists will study this behavior before we eliminate it." And with that cheerful note, the aliens teleported away, leaving behind nothing but a perfectly circular patch of scorched grass and a crowd of humans who had just collectively realized that they might be well and truly screwed. The next few hours were a blur of emergency broadcasts, social media meltdowns, and increasingly desperate attempts to contact anyone who might know what to do. The president made a statement that managed to say absolutely nothing of substance in over 500 words. Various religious leaders claimed either that this was the end times or that aliens had been part of their theology all along. Twitter, which had been renamed to something else but everyone still called Twitter, was divided between people panicking, people claiming it was all a hoax, and people wondering if aliens had any concept of student loan forgiveness. Meanwhile, the alien mothership continued to hover ominously, occasionally sending down more of those smaller craft, which appeared to be conducting some kind of survey of the planet. Theo and I had retreated to our apartment, a modestly priced 2-bedroom that we could barely afford even with both our salaries combined. We sat on our second-hand couch, watching the news with the kind of detached horror usually reserved for watching your ex's wedding photos appear on social media. Theo said, opening a bag of chips that we had designated as our apocalypse snacks. I always thought if aliens invaded, they'd at least have a cooler reason. Like they need our water, or they're harvesting us for food, or they think our brains produce some kind of cosmic fuel. And we're conquerors. It's what we do is just lazy? I suggested.
Exactly. It's like showing up to a job interview and when they ask why you want the position, saying, I like money. Money can be exchanged for goods and services. I laughed despite myself.
Maybe they're just not very creative conquerors. Maybe this is like their first conquest, and they're still figuring it out. Alien Conquest 101, Theo said, adopting a professorial tone. Today's lesson. Why, because I said so, is not a compelling reason for planetary subjugation. Our impromptu comedy routine was interrupted by a knock at the door. We froze, exchanging the kind of look that conveyed an entire conversation in seconds.
Who the hell knocks during an alien invasion?
I don't know. Maybe it's the neighbors wanting to form an anti-alien coalition. Or maybe it's the aliens, and they've learned about knocking from studying our culture.
Do we answer it?
I guess we have to? I approached the door cautiously, wishing I owned something more intimidating than a baseball bat I'd bought at a garage sale and had never actually used.
Who is it?
I called, trying to sound braver than I felt. Pizza delivery, came the response, in a voice that was trying very hard to sound human and failing spectacularly. I looked back at Theo, who mouthed, "We didn't order pizza," with the kind of exaggerated lip movements usually reserved for bad ventriloquists.
"We didn't order pizza," I called through the door.
There was a pause, followed by, "Flower delivery?" "Try again," I said, now more curious than frightened.
Another pause. "We are not aliens attempting to infiltrate your dwelling and study human behavior in its natural habitat." Theo snorted so hard I thought he might hurt himself.
Against my better judgment and ignoring Theo's frantic head-shaking, I opened the door. Standing there was one of the aliens from the park, its skin currently a nervous shade of pink. It was wearing what appeared to be a human trench coat that was several sizes too small, leaving its color-shifting ankles exposed. "Hello, fellow human," it said, raising a hand in what might have been an attempt at a wave but looked more like it was directing invisible traffic. "I am here to engage in normal human activities and conversations." I stared at the alien for a long moment, then looked back at Theo, who had moved from the couch to stand behind me, his expression a mix of terror and incredulity. "You know," I said, turning back to the alien, "if you're trying to blend in, you might want to work on your approach." "Is my disguise not adequate?" the alien asked, genuinely confused.
"You're 7 feet tall, your skin is literally changing colors as we speak, and you have 4 eyes, Theo pointed out.
"So, no, not really." The alien's colors shifted to a disappointed blue. The cultural intelligence officer assured me that humans primarily use visual cues for identification, and that covering the majority of my body would be sufficient. "Your cultural intelligence officer needs to be fired," I said. "Look, what do you want? Are you here to, subjugate us personally? Because I have to tell you, this apartment isn't worth subjugating. The hot water only works half the time, and the neighbors upstairs apparently practice river dancing at 3 a.m. "No, no," the alien said quickly. "I am here on personal business. Unauthorized personal business." It looked around nervously, as if expecting to be caught by the alien equivalent of a truant officer.
"I am curious about humans.
Your response at the initial contact was unexpected." I found myself relaxing slightly, though I kept a firm grip on my useless baseball bat. Unexpected how? "Most species respond to conquest announcements with either immediate surrender or organized military resistance," the alien explained. "You responded with questions and suggestions about gardening." "To be fair," Theo said, "that was just us. I'm pretty sure the world's militaries are currently planning some kind of coordinated response that will be dramatic, expensive, and ultimately futile." The alien's colors swirled in what might have been amusement. "Yes, we have detected several missile launches. We have redirected them into your sun. Your species' persistence is interesting." "So why are you here?" I asked again. "Just to satisfy your curiosity about the weird humans who suggested basket weaving as an alternative to conquest?" "Partially," the alien admitted.
"But also because I have questions about the purpose of conquest. Questions that are not welcomed among my kind." I exchanged a look with Theo, who shrugged as if to say, What the hell? We're probably doomed anyway.
You want to come in? I offered. We have beer, cheap wine, and those apocalypse chips Theo opened. I would like that, the alien said, its colors brightening to something almost cheerful.
My designation is Zex-427 Beta, but you may call me Zex. I'm Alex, I said.
And that's Theo. Welcome to our soon-to-be subjugated apartment. As it turned out, aliens, or at least this particular alien, could drink beer. Zex sat awkwardly on our couch, knees nearly touching its chin due to the height difference, sipping from a can of whatever was on sale when we last went shopping. This beverage is interesting, Zex said, its colors shifting to a contemplative purple. It contains ethanol, which we also use as a recreational neurotoxin. That's probably the most accurate description of beer I've ever heard, Theo said, raising his own can in a mock toast. So, Zex, I said, sitting cross-legged on the floor. We didn't have enough seating for unexpected alien guests. You have questions about conquest? Zex's colors dimmed slightly. Yes, I am what you might call a historian. I study the cultures we conquer before they are fully assimilated. It is considered a somewhat frivolous pursuit among my kind. Like an anthropologist? Theo suggested. I am not familiar with this term. Someone who studies different human cultures, their behaviors, beliefs, that sort of thing. Zex's colors brightened. Yes, exactly like that. Except that in my case, the study often feels rushed. We conquer, we assimilate, we move on. So much is lost in the process. And that bothers you, I said. It wasn't a question. It does, Zex admitted, colors swirling in what I was beginning to recognize as discomfort, which is considered a defect in my programming. Programming? Theo asked. Are you robots? Zex made a sound that might have been a laugh. No, we are biological like you, but we are engineered, created for specific purposes. I was created to document and catalog, but somewhere in my development, I developed an appreciation for the cultures I study. This is considered inefficient. Sounds like you've got the alien equivalent of an existential crisis, I said. I am not familiar with this concept either. It's when you start questioning your purpose, wondering if there's more to life than what you've been told, Theo explained. Humans go through it all the time, usually in our 20s, or whenever we're stuck in traffic. Interesting, Zex said, its colors shifting to a curious yellow. And how do you resolve this crisis? Theo and I exchanged glances, usually with poor life choices, ill-advised haircuts, and spending too much money on things we don't need, I admitted. Or therapy, Theo added. Therapy helps too. Zex's colors cycled rapidly. Your species is remarkably self-aware about its own dysfunction. This is not common. Thanks, I think, I said. But back to the whole conquering Earth thing. Is there any chance you could, I don't know, suggest to your superiors that maybe Earth isn't worth the trouble? We've got climate change, political instability, reality TV. It's a whole mess. Yeah, Theo chimed in. We're basically doing your job for you. Give us another century, and we'll have conquered ourselves right into extinction. Zex's colors darkened. That is not how it works. The decision has been made at the highest levels. The conquest will proceed. But why? I pressed. You still haven't explained why your people are so bent on conquering other planets. There has to be a reason beyond that's what we do. Zex was quiet for a moment, its colors shifting slowly from one hue to another. When it finally spoke, its voice was lower, more solemn. We conquer because we must. Because we were created to conquer. Our entire civilization, our economy, our social structure, all of it is built around the process of expansion. To stop would be to collapse. Created by whom? Theo asked. That information is restricted, Zex said, its colors now a nervous, flickering pattern. I have already said too much. I should not be here. But you are here, I pointed out, which suggests that you want something to change, that you're hoping for a different outcome than the standard conquer and assimilate routine. Zex's colors stabilized into a determined blue. You are perceptive, Alex. Yes, I am hoping. I am hoping to understand enough about your species to make a case for a different approach. Not sparing you, that would not be accepted, but perhaps preserving more of your culture than is standard. Like putting us in a zoo instead of killing us? Theo asked, his tone sharper than before. More like... Zex seemed to search for the right words. A cultural reservation. with limited autonomy. That's still pretty grim, Zex, I said.
It is the best I can hope to achieve, Zex replied, its colors a resigned gray.
Unless what? Theo and I asked simultaneously. Unless your species proves itself to be uniquely valuable. Not just interesting or curious, but essential in some way that even the High Command cannot ignore. There was a moment of silence as we all contemplated this seemingly impossible task. Well, I said finally, reaching for another beer. I guess we'd better figure out what makes humanity special, beyond our ability to turn anything into a meme within hours of its appearance on the internet. I am not familiar with the concept of a meme, Zex said. Theo's face lit up with the kind of unholy glee usually reserved for people about to show you pictures of their pets.
Oh, you poor, innocent alien. Allow me to introduce you to one of humanity's greatest achievements and most terrible mistakes. And that's how, as the alien invasion of Earth continued outside our windows, we ended up giving an extraterrestrial conqueror a crash course in internet culture, starting with Doge and working our way through to whatever was trending that week. It was either going to save our planet or convince them we deserved whatever we got. At that point, it was a toss-up. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of Theo making coffee and quietly swearing at our temperamental coffee maker. For a blissful moment, I forgot about the alien invasion, the impending doom of our species, and the fact that we had spent half the night showing internet memes to an extraterrestrial historian. Then I walked into the living room and found Zex still on our couch, surrounded by empty beer cans, its skin cycling through a rainbow of colors as it stared intently at Theo's laptop. Good morning, I said, wondering if there was an appropriate greeting for alien who stayed overnight while its species prepares to conquer your planet. Is it morning? I had not noticed the passage of time, Zex said without looking up. Your internet is fascinating. I have been exploring it continuously since you both entered your sleep cycle. You've been on the internet for... I checked the time. 8 hours straight? I'm so sorry. No. Zex's colors shifted to an excited yellow-orange. It is remarkable. The sheer volume of information, the contradictions, the creativity, the pointless arguments about insignificant details. I have never encountered anything like it. Yeah, that sounds like the internet, Theo said, bringing in 2 mugs of coffee and setting one down for me. Want some coffee, Zex? It's another neurotoxin we're fond of. Yes, please, Zex said, finally looking up. I have read about coffee in many of your online discussions. It appears to be essential to human functioning. For some of us more than others, I said, taking a grateful sip from my mug. Find anything interesting in your internet deep dive? Everything is interesting, Zex said, colors swirling enthusiastically. But most fascinating is how you document yourselves. You record everything, share everything, argue about everything. Most species we encounter have rigid information hierarchies, controlled narratives. Your species just puts it all out there. The brilliant and the banal, side by side. That's either our greatest strength or our fatal flaw, Theo observed, disappearing back into the kitchen to get a coffee for Zex. So, not to bring down the mood, I said, lowering my voice slightly. But what's happening with the whole invasion thing? Any updates? Zex's colors dimmed. The preliminary assessment phase is nearly complete. The tactical drones have mapped your major population centers, defense installations, and resource deposits. The next phase, targeted neutralization of resistance, will begin soon. How soon? I asked, feeling a cold knot form in my stomach. Within your planetary rotation, Zex said, which I took to mean today. Well, that's not great, I managed, just as Theo returned with a third mug. What's not great? Theo asked. The invasion moves to Phase 2 today, I explained. Targeted neutralization of resistance. Ah, Theo said, handing the coffee to Zex, who examined it curiously before taking a cautious sip. So, nuclear Armageddon before dinner, then? Your species' use of humor in the face of extinction continues to be fascinating, Zex observed, its colors shifting to a thoughtful blue as it took another sip of coffee. This beverage is bitter yet satisfying. I understand its appeal now. Zex, I said, sitting down across from our alien guest. You said last night that if humanity proved itself uniquely valuable, there might be a chance for something other than the standard conquest routine. What exactly would qualify as uniquely valuable? Zex watched in fascination as responses began to pour in from around the world. Some were serious, thoughtful innovations.
Others were clearly jokes or people who didn't believe the alien invasion was real, and a surprising number involved creative uses for duct tape. "Your species' response time is remarkable," Zex observed. "Its colors a mix of yellow curiosity and green amazement. And the diversity of approaches." "That's humans for you," Theo said, sorting through the submissions. "Give us an existential threat and an internet connection, and we'll generate 10,000 ideas, ranging from brilliant to absurd, in under an hour." "Look at this one," I said, pointing to a submission from someone in Australia. "They've proposed using our sewage treatment systems as biological research labs for studying extremophile bacteria. Their point is that we've basically created perfect conditions for certain types of life without even meaning to." "And this one," Theo added, "suggests that our fiction, our deliberate creation of things that aren't real, gives us a unique ability to conceptualize alternative futures and prepare for scenarios that haven't happened yet." Zex's colors cycled rapidly as it absorbed these ideas. "These are intriguing approaches, different from how we would frame such problems." "That's the point," I said. "We're not trying to out-tech you. We're trying to show that we think differently, that our messy, chaotic approach to problem-solving might actually be valuable precisely because it's different from yours." As the submissions continued to flood in, we began to curate them, organizing them into categories and preparing to present the best ones to Zex in a format it could potentially use to convince its superiors. The hours ticked by, and we tried not to think about the targeted neutralization of resistance that was supposedly imminent. Around mid-afternoon, just as we were putting the finishing touches on our presentation, there was another knock at the door.
We all froze.
Zex's colors immediately shifted to an alarmed red. "Are you expecting someone?" Zex whispered. "No," I whispered back, though I wasn't sure why we were whispering in our own apartment. The knock came again, more insistent this time, followed by a voice that was definitely not human trying to sound human. "Cultural Specialist Zex 427 Beta, your presence is required by the High Command. Your unauthorized absence has been noted." Zex's colors drained to a pale, frightened white. "It is my superior," it whispered. "I must go." "Wait," I said, grabbing the laptop. "Take this. We've organized everything. The best examples of human lateral thinking, creativity, innovation. It's all there." Zex hesitated, then took the laptop, its colors shifting between fear and determination. "I will try, but you should know, the High Command rarely changes its decisions." "Just try," Theo said. "That's all we're asking." Zex nodded, a human gesture it had apparently picked up from us, and moved to the door. Before opening it, it turned back to us. "Thank you for the coffee and the memes," Zex said, with what might have been the alien equivalent of a smile in its color patterns. "Whatever happens, I have enjoyed learning about your species." Zex's colors swirled contemplatively. "It would need to be something that the Zaxovian Empire cannot already do better. Something that would make preserving your autonomy more beneficial than simply extracting your resources and knowledge." "That's a pretty high bar," Theo said, sitting down next to me. "I mean, you guys have mastered interstellar travel, presumably have far more advanced technology in every area, and can literally teleport. What could we possibly offer that you don't already have?" Zex was quiet for a moment, its colors shifting slowly. "I am not certain, but based on my night of research, I believe your species' chaotic creativity might be unique. The way you make connections between seemingly unrelated concepts, the way you reimagine and repurpose ideas, it is different from our more structured approach." "So what, we're going to meme our way out of an alien invasion?" Theo asked, though his tone was more thoughtful than sarcastic. "Perhaps not with memes specifically," Zex said, "but with whatever underlying cognitive process allows you to create them. Your ability to find humor and meaning in seeming randomness, to create new patterns from old ones." "Lateral thinking," I suggested. "Humans are pretty good at thinking around problems rather than through them." "Yes, exactly." Zex's colors brightened considerably. "This is what I need to demonstrate to the High Command, but I need evidence, examples that cannot be dismissed as mere curiosity." "Like what?" Theo asked. "I am not certain," Zex admitted. "Something that showcases this ability in a way that clearly demonstrates its value." We sat in silence for a moment, the only sound the occasional sip of coffee. Outside, the alien mothership still loomed over the city, a constant reminder of the clock ticking down. "I have an idea," I said suddenly, "but it's completely ridiculous and probably won't work." At this point, Theo said, I think completely ridiculous is exactly the human quality we're trying to showcase. I looked at Zex, whose 4 eyes were all focused on me with an intensity that was slightly unnerving. Zex, what if we could demonstrate that humans have a unique ability to find innovative solutions to problems that your highly structured civilization might miss? Would that be enough to convince your leaders that we're worth keeping around? Possibly, Zex said, its colors shifting to a cautious green. But how would you demonstrate such a thing in the limited time available? I grinned. By creating the most human thing possible. A completely impractical, probably inadvisable, definitely unauthorized contest of ideas. 4 hours later, our apartment had been transformed into what can only be described as a cross between a hackathon, a TED Talk venue, and a doomsday prepper's fantasy. We had set up Theo's laptop to live stream to whatever parts of the internet were still functioning, with the title, Save Earth, Innovate or Die, literally. The premise was simple. We challenged anyone watching to come up with the most creative, unexpected applications of everyday human technology or concepts. Things that an advanced alien civilization might never think of because they were too logical, too efficient, or too structured in their thinking. And with that, Zex opened the door, revealing another Zaxovian whose colors were cycling through various shades of anger. The 2 aliens exchanged what sounded like a series of clicks and whistles before both teleporting away in a flash of light, leaving behind only the lingering scent of ozone and a perfectly circular scorch mark on our carpet. Well, Theo said after a moment of silence, I guess we're not getting the security deposit back. The rest of the day passed in a strange limbo. We waited for news of attacks, for emergency broadcasts, for something to indicate that the targeted neutralization of resistance had begun. But nothing happened. The alien mothership remained where it was, neither advancing its assault nor retreating. By evening, conspiracy theories were flying across social media. Some thought the aliens were simply biding their time. Others believed they had been defeated by some secret government weapon, and still others insisted that the whole thing was an elaborate hoax or mass hallucination. Theo and I sat on our balcony, sharing the last of our beer and watching the mothership shimmer in the fading light. Do you think Zex managed to convince them? Theo asked. I don't know, I admitted. It seemed pretty pessimistic about the chances. Yeah, but it also seemed genuinely impressed by human creativity. Maybe it found the right angle to present our case. I took a sip of my beer, contemplating the bizarre turn our lives had taken.
You know what's weird? I'm actually worried about Zex. Like, what if it got in trouble for hanging out with us? What if Alien High Command has some horrible punishment for fraternizing with the soon-to-be-conquered? I was thinking the same thing, Theo said. Is it Stockholm Syndrome if you start sympathizing with the alien who's part of the force invading your planet? I don't think there's a name for that yet, I said. We might be breaking new psychological ground here. We lapsed into silence again, watching as stars began to appear in the darkening sky. It was a perfect evening, warm with just a hint of a breeze. The kind of evening that made it hard to believe the world might be ending. Then, without warning, the mothership began to glow. Not the ominous glow of weapons charging, but a softer, pulsing light that spread across its surface in patterns that reminded me of Zex's color changes. Is that good or bad? Theo wondered aloud. Before I could answer, a beam of light shot down from the ship, not unlike the one that had delivered the aliens to the park. This one, however, struck our balcony directly. We scrambled back, knocking over chairs and spilling beer in our haste to get away from whatever was happening. The light intensified briefly, then vanished, leaving behind a slightly disoriented Zex. Zex! I exclaimed, equal parts surprised and relieved. You're back! And you're not dead! Theo added helpfully. Zex's colors were cycling through a pattern I hadn't seen before, something like excitement mixed with satisfaction. I am back, and you are indeed not dead, nor will you be. It took a moment for the implications of that statement to sink in. Wait, I said slowly. Are you saying... The High Command has reconsidered the conquest of Earth, Zex announced, its colors now practically pulsating with pride. Your planet has been reclassified from target for subjugation to cultural research priority. Theo and I stared at Zex, then at each other, then back at Zex. You did it? Theo asked incredulously. You actually convinced them to call off the invasion because of... what? Our memes and creative problem-solving? Not exactly, Zex said, its colors shifting to something more complex. I presented your case, but the High Command was... skeptical. However, they were intrigued enough to conduct their own analysis of your internet and global communications. And? I prompted when Zex paused. And they discovered something unexpected.
Your species has already begun developing technologies and concepts that, while primitive by our standards, are approaching problems from angles we had not considered. Your neural networks, your blockchain, your crowdsourcing, these are all inefficient by our standards, but they contain innovative approaches that could potentially be valuable. So we're not being conquered because we might have good ideas? I asked, still trying to process this unexpected reprieve. You are not being conquered because the High Command has determined that observing your species' natural development will yield more valuable insights than assimilating you would. Your chaotic, lateral thinking represents a potential evolutionary path that the Zaxovian Empire had not previously encountered or considered. We're basically a giant petri dish of ideas, Theo summarized. A somewhat crude analogy, but essentially correct, Zex agreed, its colors showing what I now recognized as amusement. You will be monitored, of course, and occasionally nudged, if you begin to veer towards self-destruction. But otherwise, you will be allowed to continue your development, unimpeded. I sat down heavily on one of the balcony chairs we hadn't knocked over in our panic. So the aliens aren't leaving? They're just watching instead of conquering? Yes, Zex confirmed. And I have been assigned as the primary cultural liaison, due to my unique insights into human behavior. So you got a promotion for hanging out with us and drinking our beer? Theo asked, grinning. Essentially, yes, Zex said, its colors showing a distinctly smug pattern. I am now the Empire's foremost expert on human culture, with authorization to establish ongoing diplomatic relations. Diplomatic relations, I repeated. As in official contact, public acknowledgement of your presence? Yes, Zex said. The High Command believes that open interaction will yield more useful data than covert observation, though they are still somewhat puzzled by your species' insistence on making images of cats with grammatically incorrect captions. I laughed, the surreal nature of the situation finally hitting me full force. So let me get this straight. Humanity was saved from alien conquest by cat memes and our weird tendency to solve problems in unnecessarily complicated ways? That is an oversimplification, Zex said, but not entirely inaccurate. Theo was already on his phone, his thumbs flying across the screen. I'm updating our live stream. Aliens cancel invasion, promote cultural liaison due to human creativity and internet culture. No one's going to believe this. They will soon enough, Zex said, its colors shifting to a bright, confident blue. The High Command has authorized me to begin formal introduction protocols tomorrow. Your world leaders have already been contacted. I don't even have words for what this is, I said, shaking my head in disbelief. Historic? Theo suggested. Improbable? Zex offered. I was thinking more along the lines of absolutely bonkers, but those work too. Zex's colors rippled in what I now recognized as laughter. Your species' linguistic creativity continues to impress. I look forward to documenting many more of your idioms and expressions. So what happens now? I asked, gesturing vaguely at the mothership still hovering above the city. Now, Zex said, its colors settling into a calm, pleasant pattern. We begin the real work of understanding each other. The High Command is particularly interested in your species' art, music, literature, and what you call reality television, though I advise them that the latter may give a somewhat distorted view of human behavior. Good call, Theo said, nodding seriously. In return, Zex continued, we will share certain technologies and knowledge that will help your species address some of its more pressing problems. Not everything. You must develop on your own to maintain the very creativity that makes you valuable, but enough to ensure your continuation as a species. Alien tech in exchange for Netflix and TikTok, Theo mused. Somehow that feels like we're getting the better end of the deal. The value of knowledge is not always immediately apparent, Zex said, its colors showing a pattern I hadn't seen before, something almost philosophical. What seems trivial to one species may be revolutionary to another. That is perhaps the most important lesson from this encounter. We fell silent for a moment, all three of us looking up at the stars now fully visible in the night sky. Do you know what I find most interesting about this outcome? Zex said finally. What's that? I asked. That in all our centuries of conquest, across hundreds of worlds and species, it took an encounter with humans, specifically, with two humans who offered an alien beer and showed it internet memes, to make the Empire question its purpose. Theo raised his beer can. To questioning purposes and finding new ones. I raised my can as well. and after a moment of confusion, Zex picked up its own and mimicked our gesture. To new beginnings, I added. To lateral thinking, Zex said, its colors shimmering with something like hope. We clinked our cans together in the universal gesture of celebration, three beings from different worlds united by beer, circumstance, and the weird, wonderful chaos of human creativity. The formal introduction of the Zaxovians to Earth went about as well as could be expected, which is to say it was a beautiful mess of political posturing, media frenzy, religious reconsideration, and internet memes. Lots and lots of memes. Some people panicked, of course. Some insisted it was all an elaborate hoax right up until the moment a Zaxovian delegate color-shifted right in front of them. World leaders scrambled to position themselves as the natural point of contact for the aliens, only to discover that the Zaxovians had already established their primary cultural liaison, a fact that became abundantly clear when Zex appeared on international television and specifically thanked Alex and Theo, who provided coffee and instructed me in the ways of your internet. Overnight, we became minor celebrities, which was as awkward as it was unexpected. News vans camped outside our apartment, talk shows wanted interviews, and our social media accounts exploded with followers, most of whom seemed to believe we had some special insight into alien psychology. All I did was share memes and beer with an alien who happened to knock on our door, I explained to one particularly persistent reporter. If there's a lesson here, it's that hospitality and a willingness to explain cat videos can apparently save the world. As for the broader implications of the Zaxovian arrival, those unfolded more slowly. The first technologies they shared were focused on environmental remediation, which seemed both practical and pointed, a gentle alien suggestion that maybe we should clean up our own mess before venturing further into space. Universities around the world established xenocultural studies programs. Businesses scrambled to understand the implications of alien technology for their industries, and religions either incorporated the existence of aliens into their theologies or doubled down on human exceptionalism. Through it all, Zex remained a constant presence in our lives, stopping by regularly for coffee and updates on human culture, always with new questions and observations. We became, in Zex's words, cultural translators, helping to bridge the gap between human chaos and Zaxovian order. I still don't understand why humans find it amusing when a small mammal knocks an object off a flat surface, Zex admitted during one such visit, about 6 months after the non-invasion. It's not just that they knock it off, Theo explained patiently. It's the deliberate way they do it while maintaining eye contact. It's like a tiny act of defiance. Defiance, Zex repeated, its colors cycling thoughtfully. This concept appears frequently in your culture. You seem to value it highly. I guess we do, I said, considering this. Humans tend to root for the underdog, the rebel, the one who questions authority. Perhaps this is why your species was able to impress the High Command, Zex suggested. Your instinct to defy expectations, to question established patterns. It is both your greatest strength and your most perplexing quality. Is that a compliment or a criticism? Theo asked, grinning. It is an observation, Zex replied, its colors showing amusement. One that continues to provide valuable insights to my research. And how's that going? I asked. Your research on human lateral thinking. Extremely well, Zex said, its colors brightening. The High Command has approved the establishment of a permanent research station in orbit around your planet. We will be studying human creativity and problem-solving for generations to come. So we really are just a giant petri dish to you, Theo said, though his tone was light. If you prefer that analogy, yes, Zex admitted. But a petri dish that has already changed the course of an empire. Before encountering Earth, the Zaxovian Empire had one purpose: conquest. Now, we are beginning to consider alternatives. Research, exchange, collaboration. All because you decided to knock on our door and pretend to be a pizza delivery person, I said, still amazed by the improbable chain of events. A decision that was, itself, an act of defiance, Zex pointed out, its colors showing what I now recognized as pride. Perhaps I am becoming more human than I realized. Or perhaps, Theo suggested, being human isn't about the species you belong to, but about the willingness to question, to create, to find humor in the absurd. A philosophical observation worthy of study, Zex said, raising its coffee mug in a gesture it had adopted from us. To questioning everything, even one's own purpose. We raised our mugs as well, 3 friends from different worlds, united by curiosity, coffee, and the cosmic joke that had turned an alien invasion into the beginning of something much more interesting. Years later, when the initial excitement had died down, and the presence of Zaxovians on Earth had become almost normal, Theo and I found ourselves back at Cosmic Grounds, sitting at the same table where we had first speculated about alien invasions on that fateful Sunday morning. The hipster barista was gone, replaced by a young woman with blue hair who didn't bat an eye when Zex joined us, its skin cycling through happy yellows and oranges as it approached our table. "I have news," Zex announced without preamble, settling into the chair we had specially modified to accommodate its height. "Good news or bad news?" Theo asked, sliding a mug of coffee, which Zex had developed quite a taste for, across the table. "Unexpected news," Zex said, its colors showing a complex pattern of excitement and uncertainty. "The High Command has approved my proposal." "Which proposal was that?" I asked, curious. Zex had submitted many proposals over the years, most of them aimed at expanding cultural exchange between our species. "The Interspecies Creative Initiative," Zex said, its colors practically vibrating with enthusiasm. "A program to identify species across the galaxy with unique cognitive approaches and bring them together for collaborative problem-solving." "You're creating an intergalactic think tank?" Theo asked, eyebrows raised. "Essentially, yes," Zex confirmed. "And they want you both to be part of the human contingent." I nearly choked on my coffee. "Us? Why us? There are literal geniuses on this planet, Zex. Scientists, artists, innovators." "All of whom will be considered," Zex assured me. But the High Command was specific. They want the humans who first demonstrated the value of lateral thinking, who took in an enemy scout and showed it memes instead of responding with fear or hostility. "I'm not sure showing you bad internet jokes qualifies us for an intergalactic think tank," Theo said, though I could tell he was intrigued by the idea. "It is precisely because you do not see your actions as exceptional that you are valuable," Zex explained, its colors settling into a patient blue. "Your instinct to connect, to share, to find humor even in potential extinction, these are the qualities that the initiative needs." I looked at Theo, who shrugged in that "why not" way he had. "So what, we'd go to space? Visit other planets?" "Eventually, yes," Zex said. "The initiative will require travel between member worlds. But more importantly, it will require opening your minds to ways of thinking that may seem as alien to you as your memes once seemed to me." "Will there be coffee in space?" Theo asked, only half joking. "I have personally ensured that Earth coffee will be available on all initiative vessels," Zex assured him, its colors showing amusement. I sat back, trying to process the offer. From an ordinary Sunday debate about aliens to being invited to join an intergalactic creative collective, life had taken a turn I could never have imagined. "You know," I said finally, "when we first met, you told us that your species conquers because that's what you do, that your entire civilization was built around the process of expansion." "I remember," Zex said, its colors dimming slightly at the memory. "And now you're building something new, something based on collaboration rather than conquest." Zex's colors brightened again. "Yes, thanks in no small part to two humans who offered beer to an alien instead of running away." "I'm pretty sure the beer was Theo's idea," I said, grinning at my roommate. "And the memes were yours?" Theo countered. "So I guess we're both to blame for saving the world and changing an alien empire." "A strange kind of blame," Zex observed, its colors showing what I had come to recognize as its version of a smile. "The best kind," I said, raising my coffee mug. "To strange new purposes, and the even stranger paths that lead to them." "To the Interspecies Creative Initiative," Theo added, raising his own mug. "To humanity," Zex said, joining our toast with a gentle clink of ceramic against ceramic. "The species that conquered not through force, but through cat videos and chaotic creativity." As we sat there, laughing in a coffee shop that had somehow become the unlikely birthplace of interstellar diplomacy, I couldn't help but think that this was perhaps the most human victory possible. Accidental, improbable, and fueled by equal parts curiosity and caffeine. And somewhere out in the vast universe, I was certain, other species were about to discover the strange and wonderful chaos that is human thinking. One meme at a time. The end.